Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, February 7, 2025. President Donald Trump applauds Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency finalizing the near elimination of the U.S. Agency for International Development and the expected next target in the federal government downsizing the Department of Education. A group of House Democrats are prevented from entering the Education Department building in Washington as they protest the DOGE cuts. Senate confirms President Trump's pick for White House Budget Director Russell Vought in a party line vote. House passes a bill to prevent a future president from banning oil and gas extraction techniques known as fracking without congressional approval. President Trump meets the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba to discuss trade and security issues. And President Trump does not rule out tariffs to close the trade gap with Japan. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth commits the Pentagon to pass a clean audit within 4 years. And we'll hear from the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem about preparations for Super Bowl Sunday in New Orleans. CNBC writes a federal judge on Friday said he would temporarily pause the Trump administration's plan to place thousands of workers at the U.S. Agency for International Development on administrative leave. About 2,200 USAID employees were set to be placed on leave Friday night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern as part of President Donald Trump's efforts to shut down the independent government agency. 500 USAID workers are already on administrative leave, a lawyer for the Department of Justice said in court. Judge Carl Nichols delivered the ruling after hearing arguments from the Trump administration and two groups representing federal workers in U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. That was from CNBC. President Trump was asked about DOGE and Elon Musk and USAID at a joint news conference at the White House with the visiting Japanese Prime Minister. The president also asked about the Education Department, possibly being next on the chopping block, and also about DOGE's access to data at the Treasury Department.
Democratic lawmakers are really upset that DOGE engineers have access to these Treasury payment systems. The Senate Intel Dems wrote a letter to Susie Wiles. They're saying that these systems are used to disperse trillions of dollars each year and contain everyday Americans' personal information like social security numbers, home addresses, bank accounts. Why does DOGE need all of that?
Well, it doesn't, but they get it very easily. I mean, we don't have very good security in our country, and they get it very easily. And what we're doing, if you look at what has just taken place with respect to some of the investments that have been made on another agency that people have been talking about for years, but nobody did anything about it, it's absolutely obscene, dangerous, bad, very costly. I mean, virtually every investment made is a con job. There's nothing of value to anybody unless there's a kickback scheme going on, which is possible. And we're going to be doing more and more of that. We're going to be looking at Department of Education. We're going to be looking at even our military. We're going to be looking at tremendous amounts of money, Peter, being spent on things that bear no relationship to anything and have no value. We're talking about trillions of dollars. It will be, in the end, trillions of dollars being absolutely wasted and perhaps illegally. I would say certainly in many cases illegally, but perhaps illegally overall. And I'm very proud of the job that this group of young people, generally young people, but very smart people, they're doing. They're doing it at my insistence. It would be a lot easier not to do it, but we have to take some of these things apart to find the corruption, and we found tremendous corruption.
You mentioned the Department of Education. What did you think when you saw Democratic lawmakers trying to get into the Department of Education earlier today?
Oh, I see the same ones. I see Maxine Waters, a lowlife. I see, you know, all these people. They don't love our country. They don't love our country. We want great education. So they rank 40 countries in education. We're ranked dead last. But the good news is we're number one in one category. You know what that is? Cost per pupil. We spend more per pupil than any other country in the world. You look at Norway, Denmark, Sweden, various countries all up and down, Finland, China does very well in education. And then you look at us. We spend much more money than they do per pupil or any other way. But we spend much more money than they do, and yet we're ranked this year, Biden's last year, congratulations, Joe, we're ranked dead last. So what I want to see is education. Number one, I like choice. We all like choice. But beyond choice, long beyond choice, I want to see it go back to the states where great states that do so well have no debt, They're operated brilliantly. They'll be as good as Norway or Denmark or Sweden or any of the other highly ranked countries. They'll be, you probably have 35 to 38 states will be right at the top. And the rest will come along. They'll have to come along competitively. And by the way, we'll be spending a lot less money, and we'll have great education.
President Donald Trump at a joint news conference at the White House with a visiting Japanese prime minister. ABC News writes the Department of Government Efficiency posted photographs of the exterior of the U.S. Agency for International Development before and after the removal of signage from the agency's Pennsylvania Avenue office. Unburdened by what has been, the DOGE account wrote on X, a jab at the phrase frequently used by former Vice President Kamala Harris. That was from ABC News. On the Department of Education, from Axios, a group of House Democrats tried and failed Friday to gain entry to the department to meet with the acting secretary. It is the fourth time this week that Democratic lawmakers have been blocked from entering a federal agency that has been targeted by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Before the confrontation with a man blocking the entrance at Education Department who identified himself as a federal employee, the House Democrats held a news conference. Mark Takano of California is on the House Education and Workforce Committee.
We're here today at the Department of Education because we have a duty to our constituents, a duty to our country, and a duty to the tens of millions of students, teachers, and families across the United States. President Donald Trump has promised to abolish the Department of Education, and he believes that he can do this through executive order. And we're here to remind him that he cannot. The department was created through an act of Congress, and it cannot be abolished except through an act of Congress. But the executive branch is not coming to Congress to work with us. So today, Congress is coming to the executive branch. It's coming to you. Already, Trump and Musk have placed DOGE staffers in the building where they have access to the private data of millions of students and families. Already, they have placed dozens of employees who perform vital services on which our schools, teachers, and students depend on leave. So we're here today to follow up on a letter that 95 of my colleagues and I sent this week. We asked to meet with the acting secretary, and we have yet to receive a response. We are here to ask her, will you comply with an illegal executive order to shut down the Department of Education? Although the president is determined to shut Congress out of the process, he will not. We will not allow it. We will not cede the responsibility for our future generations to one man, his ideology, and his unelected lieutenants. I will not stand for it. My colleagues will not stand for it. And today, we are demanding that the acting secretary meet with us and agree. Donald Trump and Elon Musk must not and will not destroy the Department of Education on a whim.
Congressman Mark Takano, Democrat from California, at a news conference with other House Democrats outside the Education Department in Washington. Then they tried to enter the building and see that acting secretary, but were denied entry.
Please stand aside, sir.
I'm not standing aside.
Why not?
Because my role is to make sure that...
What authority do you have to block members of Congress from the oversight? We don't have oversight responsibilities. By what authority can you deny members of Congress their oversight role?
If you don't have a business reason to be here,
you do not have authority, sir. You do not have authority.
Access entrance.
There is no authority for you to deny members of Congress their oversight responsibility.
We're the
If you have an appointment and you're on a guest list, we will let you in.
Can I ask you a question? You have to be on a guest list. Is what you're saying?
Or you have to have an escort.
Let me ask
come
you a
down
question.
to
Can I ask my question? Are you telling me today that you have to be on a guest list in order to come to the Department of Education?
Either we are informed in advance if somebody's coming, or
they knew we were coming.
You were informed in advance.
So
94 members of Congress.
take you where you're going.
Sir, 94 members of Congress signed a letter asking the acting secretary for a meeting and to answer a simple question. and she is
I'm
apparently.
not aware of the meeting.
So you have to be on a guest list to enter the Department of Education.
Members
I
of
just
Congress,
explained
we
you
don't have to be on
either
a guest list.
On a list in advance to have access, or if you're coming, then you have to let us know who your escort is. I don't know.
That was
that you
last
have an
year.
escort.
Did something change between last
That's
year?
always been the procedure.
No, it hasn't. I've walked into this building multiple times last year.
Outside the Education Department in Washington, D.C., the man standing in front of the locked doors and keeping the House Democrats out, identified as Jim Harefield, Education Department Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Security, Facilities, and Logistics Services. That exchange with him went on for about 15 minutes. We've got the video at our website, cspan.org. This is Washington Today. U.S. Senate is not in session today. Thursday night, senators confirmed the nomination of Russell Vought for Director of OMB, Office of Management and Budget, also called the White House Budget Office. It was a party line vote, 53-47. That came after a marathon overnight session in which Senate Democrats spoke against this nomination. Here is Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii.
In Trump's first term as acting OMB director, Vought wrote a budget that, among other things, would have cut nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid, slashed nearly $300 billion from social safety net programs like food assistance, eliminated $170 billion from student loans, and zeroed out programs like LIHEAP and community development block grants to help with housing assistance and building community infrastructure. Just like for families, where we spend our money reflects our priorities and our values. Mr. Vought's 2021 budget demonstrated that he sees no value in helping the American people. This time we know it will be even worse because he is going to be in charge at OMB. And like Trump, Mr. Vought will do whatever he wants, regardless of the law or the Constitution, from forcing out civil servants to withholding funds appropriated by Congress.
Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, on the Senate floor before the Senate voted Thursday to confirm Russell Vought for OMB director. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, also spoke right before that confirmation vote, and he said Democrats should not be criticizing the Trump administration's actions to reduce spending. He said former President Joe Biden went around Congress as well to increase spending.
The all-night vigil and a lot of the speeches that were made over here, there was a lot of high rhetoric, I would argue, about attacks on democracy, attacks on the Constitution. And I think it's important just when you make those arguments that there be at least some amount of self-reflection. Because over the last 4 years, there have been a lot of times when the executive branch went around the Congress or tried to rewrite the laws that Congress had passed in ways that increased spending. And I can use a good example under the Committee of Jurisdiction of the Commerce Committee, which is where I spent a lot of my time over the past few years. There was a program called the BEAD program, which was designed to extend broadband access to people in rural areas of the country, unserved areas of the country. And it passed almost, well, about 3 years ago. I didn't vote for it at the time, but that provision in the bill was designed to deliver broadband services to unserved areas, rural areas of the country. And we are now 3 years into that program, and there hasn't been a single dollar spent or a single household connected through that program. And it was a $42 billion funding program. $42 billion. Not a single dollar spent. Why? Because the administration decided to add conditions to it. Conditions that made it unusable to a lot of the telecoms, at least certainly the telecoms in my area, and I think I represent probably as rural of an area as you'll ever find. What were some of those conditions? Well, they said you had to use union labor, something in South Dakota we're a right-to-work state, so we don't have a lot of that. You had to meet climate conditions for your subcontractors, your suppliers, everything else. You had to comply with certain climate requirements. And then you there was an issue about rate regulation. Now, rate regulation, interestingly enough, was specifically banned by the statute. The statute said no rate regulation. So what the administration did is they added to the law in all these ways in a way that made it virtually impossible for anybody to use. So here we are, 3 years later, 3 years after that law passed this Congress, and not a single dollar has been spent, and not a single household has been connected. Why? Because the executive branch decided they wanted to do some things with this law that Congress never intended. I didn't hear the complaints about that or all-night vigils.
The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, on the Senate floor Thursday, right before the party line vote to confirm Russell Vought for director of OMB. He also brought up two other examples he said were of former President Joe Biden going around Congress to increase spending. One was the student loan forgiveness plan and the thrifty food program in the Agriculture Department. He said those amounted to hundreds of billions of dollars. From Politico, House Republicans are still far from finalizing several key details of a budget blueprint that Speaker Mike Johnson is pledging to advance in the House next week, with negotiations expected to continue through the weekend as the Senate races ahead with its own plans. While House GOP leaders trumpeted tremendous progress coming out of a White House meeting with President Donald Trump on Thursday, key holdouts on Trump's sweeping agenda of tax cuts, border security, and energy initiatives indicated Friday that they remained unconvinced about the level of spending cuts in the bill. Separately, Republican tax writers continue to struggle with the ballooning costs of Trump's wish list, which includes not only an extension of his 2017 tax cut package, but also new income tax exemptions for tips, overtime earnings, and Social Security benefits. That was from Politico. Speaker Mike Johnson spoke with reporters as he walked through the Capitol building today.
No, there won't be any details announced, at least until the end of the weekend, but probably closer to Monday. We have just a few final details to iron out, and it's going very well. I'm very excited about where we are and the fact that we're going to be moving this forward. So,
can you talk about the range of spending cuts or savings that you're...
No, I told the members that I wouldn't telegraph any of that to the press until everybody's on board with the idea. So
sure.
Stay tuned, but it's moving forward, and we're going to get this job done.
Are you still hoping to have debt limit addressed in this?
I think that probably will be part of it, yes.
Probably will be part of it. Thank you.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, speaking to reporters as he walked through the U.S. Capitol building. Forbes posted that audio. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, was asked about budget reconciliation at his weekly news conference.
We expect sometime before the end of the weekend, maybe Monday, Republicans to release their tax cut and government spending cut plan here. Will Democrats just dismiss that out of hand? And can you elaborate what the concerns are if they start to nibble around the edges of entitlement programs? But by the same token here, the idea that there'll be tax cuts in there, that they would argue is something that would lower costs for people.
We've been waiting for this so-called budget proposal for weeks. When is it coming? And what's the problem? What's the problem? We've been lectured for months by Republicans that they have a big mandate. Where is your bill? Where's your budget proposal? What we've seen from Republicans in terms of the budget is that they want to end Medicaid as we know it, are considering eliminating the mortgage interest deduction, and want to take away veterans benefits and nutritional assistance from children and families. Is that something that Democrats will support? No. We will also not support massive tax breaks for Republican billionaire donors and wealthy corporations while doing nothing to lower the high cost of living for everyday Americans and then sticking working class Americans with the bill. But it's all hypothetical because we've been waiting day after day, week after week, month after month for the Republican budget proposal. Where is it? What's the problem?
You've lectured America that you have a big mandate. Where is it?
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at his weekly news conference today. There's a political article about government funding in the more near term, and that is funding that expires mid-March, and if it's not renewed, there could be a government shutdown. Article begins, shutdown, showdown. Speaker Mike Johnson warned today that government funding talks had stalled, and it seemed that Democrats had walked away, putting the onus on House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries to re-engage. Jeffries shot back at his presser that Johnson's comment was just projection, since Republicans hold all the power. But top appropriators sounded more optimistic about ongoing negotiations than Johnson did. That was from Politico. Fox News writes the Republican-led House passed legislation to block future administrations from enacting bans on oil and gas drilling without congressional approval. There were 118 Democrats who voted against the legislation, while Republican House members unanimously voted in favor of its passage. The bill comes after former President Joe Biden enacted several regulations on oil and gas during his term, including banning future oil and gas drilling along 625 million acres of coastal and offshore waters just weeks before he left office. That was the article from Fox News. Here's some of the House floor debate before the vote on the bill. Congressman August Pfluger, Republican of Texas, is the sponsor.
You know, the American public spoke loud and clear on November 5th. They said energy was on the ballot. They said that the hilarity and the fraudulent approach that the Biden administration took towards energy policy was wholly rejected. Madam Speaker, we're in a new day, and thank goodness we are. I represent the Permian Basin, Midland and Odessa, Texas, and for 4 years, this community was demonized by the president, demonized by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, demonized for the work that they did to bring affordable, reliable energy to this country. And they did so with an all-out assault. I am proud today to support my legislation, H.R. 26, the Protecting American Energy Production Act. And this is on behalf of every one of my constituents in Midland and Odessa, Texas, who provide the very pen that's being written on by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, who provide the cell phones and the cosmetics and the personal protective gear that goes into an emergency room. Not just liquid fuels, but using a safe technology, hydraulic fracturing, which was completely falsely characterized briefly this morning by my colleague on the other side of the aisle. But in 2019, America became the #1 oil and gas producer, and it is wholly due to the shale revolution and the technology of being able to environmentally friendly extract this product and produce it here domestically for our use, to ship it to our allies and our partners around the world. But after 4 years of the previous administration's outright assault on American energy, it is critical now that we codify and that we work tirelessly to restore some integrity and some character to this American energy dominance and pass meaningful legislation that will unleash American energy, create jobs for hardworking Americans.
Congressman August Pfluger, Republican from Texas, on the House floor. Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari, Democrat from Arizona, voted no on this bill.
The United States is already producing more oil than ever, more than any country in history. Republicans' dirty drilling agenda will not make America any more energy dominant, and it won't drive prices down. If we could drill our way out of the affordability crisis, we would have already done so. The answer is not more oil. When we drill more and more, the only ones who benefit are those at the top, the CEOs, the multinational corporations, and the already rich billionaires who are profiting off of the American people. In fact, several Federal Trade Commission complaints and class action lawsuits from last year say that big oil CEOs have been illegally colluding with each other and with some of our adversaries to keep prices high and profits up. Big oil is already getting at least $15 billion in subsidies from the federal government. What more could they possibly want? This dirty drilling agenda has never been about lowering costs. Less than 3 weeks in, this administration's true colors are already shining. After promising lower prices for everyday Americans, the president is threatening a trade war with our closest allies, which will drive up the cost of everything from energy to cars to produce to technology. The administration is threatening mass deportations of people who are part of the workforce and contributing to our economy. And the Republican-led Congress is plotting how to cut spending on health care and clean energy in order to pay for tax cuts for billionaires.
Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari, Democrat from Arizona, on the House floor. The House passed this bill by a vote of 226 to 188. 16 Democrats joining all Republicans in voting yes. The bill now heads to the Senate. It's an article from AP. As part of the Trump administration's push to expand U.S. energy production, federal officials will review and consider redrawing the boundaries of national monuments created under previous presidents to protect unique landscapes and cultural resources. The review, laid out in a Monday order from new Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, is raising alarms among conservation groups concerned that President Trump will shrink or eliminate monuments established by his predecessors, including Democrat Joe Biden. Burgum gave agency officials until February 18th to submit plans on how to comply with his order. Reporting from AP. The Labor Department says the U.S. added 143,000 jobs in January, and the unemployment rate dropped to 4%. New York Times writes the pace of hiring slowed slightly in January, signaling more subdued employment growth, even as joblessness remained low. Kevin Hassett, chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, spoke to reporters in the White House driveway about this report.
The big news for us is that it was a weak jobs number, and the downward revisions, which we've seen a pattern of over the last few years, were really, really stunningly bad. The Biden jobs record was about 1 million workers worse than we thought yesterday. And so when you're thinking about what this does to markets and to inflation and so on, be mindful of the fact that we just had the biggest downward revision for the American jobs record that we've had since 2009. And that's the news of the jobs report, is the massive downward revision. And so for some reason, the government was overstating the Biden jobs record month after month after month. And now that President Trump's in, they've decided there's no political gain for doing that, I guess. And so they've revised it back to the truth. And the truth is that we're inheriting a very difficult jobs market because of Joe Biden's terrible policies.
Kevin Hassett, chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, with reporters in the White House driveway. Wall Street today, the Dow down 444, NASDAQ down 268, S&P down 57. Washington today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea, it's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. President Donald Trump said Friday he wants to slash the U.S. trade deficit with Japan as he welcomed Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba to the White House for their first face-to-face meeting. That's the start of an Associated Press article that continues. Donald Trump added that he isn't taking the possibility of leveling tariffs against Japan off the table, but believes that the issue can be resolved without taking punitive action. The United States has a $68 billion trade deficit with Japan. Donald Trump's push to cut the trade deficit comes as he pursued tariffs on both friends and foes in an effort to boost American manufacturing. That's the Associated Press article. Here is Donald Trump getting a reporter's question at today's joint news conference.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
This is Hiramoto from Nippon Television. My question, let me ask two quick questions.
Sure.
First, this is the first meeting between Mr. President and Prime Minister Ishiba. So what kind of impression do you have on him? And number two, do you have an idea or do you have a plan to impose tariff against Japan so far? Thank you.
I think that he is going to be a great prime minister. I think he's a very strong man, very, very strong. I have great respect for him. I've known him for a long time through a reputation. Shinzo Abe thought the world of him, and I think he's going to do a fantastic job as prime minister. A very strong person. I wish he wasn't so strong. I wish he was a little bit weaker than that, but that's what I got. I have to get strong guys all the time. He's going to be a great prime minister. I also, in terms of tariffs, I mean, we're going to have tariffs, mostly reciprocal tariffs, where we go with, and I'm going to be probably meeting on that Monday or Tuesday, have an announcement, probably a news conference, but probably reciprocal tariffs where a country pays so much or charges us so much, and we do the same. So very reciprocal, because I think that's the only fair way to do it. That way, nobody's hurt. They charge us, we charge them. It's the same thing. And I seem to be going in that line as opposed to a flat fee tariff.
President Donald Trump at the joint news conference at the White House with the Prime Minister of Japan, Shigeru Ishiba. President Trump referring to Shinzo Abe, a former Prime Minister of Japan in the first Trump administration, who was assassinated in 2022. The Japanese Prime Minister was asked by a reporter today about tariffs, increased Japanese investment in the U.S., increased defense spending by Japan, and Nippon Steel's proposed purchase of U.S. Steel, which President Trump says has now been converted from a takeover to an investment.
As for the increase of our defense expenditures, it is not that we are told by the United States to do so. Japan, on our own decision and on our own responsibility, we need to increase our defense expenditures. But of course, we need to communicate and consult with the United States. But the responsibility is with Japan, and the decision is with Japan. Now, on the tariffs, that if it is mutually beneficial, tariffs need to be set. And as for Japan, as Mr. President has introduced to us, an unprecedented investment will be made from Japan to the United States, and so many jobs will be created. So $1 trillion is the target. And this will be to the benefit of the United States, but also to the benefit of Japan as well. Investment is mutually beneficial. So be it with the U.S. Steel, as Mr. President says, it is not acquisition, it is investment. So the Japanese technology will be provided, and the better quality products will be manufactured in the United States, and the U.S. Steel will make products which will contribute not only to the United States and Japan, but also to the whole world. It is not one-sided. It will be reciprocal. It will be mutually beneficial. And I believe we were able to share on this, and that is the biggest result that I have seen today.
The Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba through an interpreter at the White House at a joint news conference with President Donald Trump. A Politico article about his visit has this: determined to strike a chord with Donald Trump to improve his political standing at home, Shigeru Ishiba arrived at the White House with promises to increase Japanese investment in the U.S., to cooperate on AI, semiconductors, and defense, and to work quickly to rebalance a trade deficit that favors Japan. Asked about his first impressions of Donald Trump, Ishiba described him, according to a translator, as intimidating on television but powerful and sincere in person. The Japanese Prime Minister quickly added that he wasn't sucking up. That was from Politico. Times of Israel writes that President Donald Trump says he's in no rush to implement his plan to take over and redevelop Gaza after repeatedly floating the idea that Egypt and Jordan take in some Gazan refugees while the Strip was being rebuilt, an idea rejected by Cairo and Amman. Trump earlier this week suggested that the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, while the enclave's residents should be resettled in other countries. The international community, including allies of Washington and Jerusalem, has largely criticized Trump's plan. That was from the Times of Israel article. Here's President Trump answering a reporter's question on this topic during a White House Oval Office meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister.
Any further deliberations on Gaza, sir? The timetable for a takeover?
No deliberations. It's been very well received, where basically the United States would view it as a real estate transaction, where we'll be an investor in that part of the world. And no rush to do anything. We wouldn't need anybody there. It would be supplied and given to us by Israel. They'll watch it in terms of security. We're not talking about boots in the ground or anything, but I think the fact that we're there, that we have an investment there, I think would go a long way to creating peace. We don't want to see everybody move back and then move out in 10 years. This has been going on for 50 years, much more than that. We just want to see stability. That would be having us have that particular piece in that particular location, I think would show great stability and would lead to great stability in the area for very little money, very little price, and we wouldn't need soldiers at all. That will be taken care of by others. And the investments are taken care of by others also. So for no investment, I mean virtually no investment whatsoever, it would bring stability to the area, and others can invest in it later on. But we're in no rush on it. There's absolutely no rush.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office with the visiting Japanese Prime Minister taking reporters' questions. New York Times has an article, the International Criminal Court on Friday condemned President Trump's executive order imposing sanctions on it, saying that the action sought to harm the court's independent and impartial judicial work. Key European allies of the U.S. also distanced themselves from his decision. Mr. Trump's order on Thursday said his administration would impose tangible and significant consequences on people who work on investigations that threaten the national security of the United States and its allies, including Israel. Reporting from the New York Times. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who met with President Trump at the White House earlier this week and with U.S. senators on Capitol Hill yesterday, today was on Capitol Hill again meeting with House Speaker Mike Johnson. They both made statements. First, the Speaker.
Today we discussed the special partnership that we have between these two countries, and I thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for his unrelenting commitment to making the region and the world a safer place amid really extraordinary challenges. What Israel has done in the past 7 months really is a testament to what can be accomplished when we do not let the enemy set the rules. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said Tuesday at the White House, when our enemies see daylight between Israel and the United States, they will exploit it. And we all know that is true. And that's why strong, decisive leadership is so crucial in this time. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu both understand that peace is secured through strength, not appeasement, and not by turning our backs on our allies. Before he even took office in January, President Trump and his team helped secure the ceasefire agreement and the return of American and Israeli hostages. This week, he announced a plan to exert maximum pressure on Iran and its proxies who terrorize the Israeli people and the world. This is what decisive leadership looks like. And with President Trump back in the White House and Republican control of Congress, America will not turn its back on our national security priorities. Our support for Israel remains ironclad.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, in the U.S. Capitol building, stand beside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The American-Israeli alliance has never been stronger. I'm now completing a week in which began with an extraordinary meeting with President Trump. And under his leadership, the critical decisions that show his commitment and the American people's commitment to Israel have come to the fore instantly. First, he renewed immediately the supply of weapons that had been stopped, which we need as we're fighting for our future, for our existence, and for the broader Middle East in a seven-front war. He immediately released those weapons. He issued yesterday these sanctions on this scandalous and corrupt organization, the ICC, that threatens the right of all democracies to defend themselves by themselves. And he's done so many things in the interim, just in 2 weeks. But I was deeply moved by the reception that we got, the substantive things that we discussed, making sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, and also making sure that Hamas is destroyed. We're not going to have a future for Gaza or for future for peace in our part of the world if Hamas remains there. And we agreed on many things, but I think it sets the tone for this great strengthening of the American-Israeli alliance. It's not only an alliance between governments. It's an alliance between peoples. This is the house of the people. And you, Mr. Speaker, represent the American people that overwhelmingly support the state of Israel. You know, I was driving through Washington. I look outside. There are people on the sidewalks. They see, you know, the limousines pass, and they all go like this. They all go like this. They all support. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that's the spirit that animates you and so many of your colleagues here. And I want to thank you again. And I want to say, you're invited to Israel this year in Jerusalem. I know you're busy, but find space to do that.
I can't wait.
You'll be welcome on a red carpet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu standing beside House Speaker Mike Johnson in the U.S. Capitol building in Washington. Neither answered reporters' shouted questions after their statements. And the Prime Minister saying that people, when the limousine goes by, go like this. He was giving the thumbs up. BBC News reports that Hamas has released the names of the next hostages to be freed in Gaza on Saturday in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. 18 hostages have been freed since the ceasefire began on January 19th. Israel has released 383 prisoners in return. Hamas says another 183 are to be freed on Saturday. Some 33 hostages and 1,900 prisoners are due to be freed by the end of the first stage of the ceasefire in 3 weeks' time. Israel says 8 of the 33 are dead. Reporting from BBC News. You're listening to Washington Today. And from TheHill.com, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Friday committed to getting the Pentagon to pass a clean audit within 4 years after the Defense Department failed several in a row. During a town hall with defense staffers, Hegseth said he will ensure the Pentagon, at a bare minimum, passes a clean audit by the end of the current administration. That was from The Hill. Here's the Defense Secretary.
Our defense industrial base, our acquisitions process, how we rapidly field new technologies, how we learn from conflicts around the globe, how we match what we fund to capabilities and effects. There's a lot of programs around here that we spend a lot of money on that when you actually war game it don't have the impact you want them to. One of the benefits I have is I don't have any special interests. I don't have a background invested in any systems or services. I'm agnostic to that. It means I'm going to take a lot of arrows, and I'm prepared to do so. That's fine. We need the best systems in the hands of warfighters where they need it, to the COCOMs, to deter and send the signals that when that fight comes, we're ready to win and win decisively. That includes a Pentagon audit, which to the Marines out there, y'all got to figure it out. And we appreciate that. Lean and mean. We are going to focus heavily to ensure that at a bare minimum, by the end of 4 years, the Pentagon passes a clean audit. The American taxpayers deserve that. They deserve to know where their $850 billion go, how it's spent, and make sure it's spent wisely. It used to be that if you called for an audit, somehow you were undermining the department. I believe the exact opposite. I believe we are accountable for every dollar we spend, and every dollar of waste we find or redundancy is a dollar we can invest somewhere else, as President Trump has committed directly to rebuilding our nation's military.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, part of his opening statement at a town hall meeting at the Pentagon with Defense Department employees. He was discussing what he calls his 3 pillars. The first is restoring the warrior ethos, which includes, he says, abolishing diversity and inclusion programs. Number 2, rebuilding the military, and you heard the audit as part of that. And number 3, reestablishing deterrence, which he says also includes securing the U.S. southern border. New York Times writes in the final days before Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, local, state, and federal officials have described a dash to beef up security plans that were robust even before a New Year's Day terrorist attack unleashed anguish and alarm in the city. One of the most visible changes is the enhanced security zone around Bourbon Street, the site of the deadly ramming attack and a hive of activity when the Super Bowl is in town. That was the New York Times. The Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says there are no specific credible threats regarding the Super Bowl. She was with the Louisiana governor and New Orleans mayor on Bourbon Street in New Orleans on Monday.
The Super Bowl is the biggest Homeland Security event that we do every single year, and this will be the 11th time that New Orleans has hosted that event. And we plan for it to be an exciting event, one that will be safe, that we will have the best team win, but also that people come here, have a memorable experience, that they'll be able to go home and be able to appreciate the fact that this city not only welcomes people and takes care of them on their worst days, but also allows them to come back and to be safe. What I'm going to ask is everybody respect your law enforcement officers, that you respect public safety. We are a nation of laws, and there's consequences for breaking those laws. So as we go forward and we plan big events like this, we are going to make sure that we have safe events and that we're partnering together with federal agencies, with state agencies, and with local agencies. So that is one of the things that I plan to do, is put forward a blueprint for how we communicate to each other. We've seen failures across the country of agencies not talking well and not working well, and it's just not going to happen anymore, not on my watch. So we will have clear communications. Everybody's on the same page all the time, regardless of what level of government bureaucracy we're at. That's going to go out the window, and we're going to make sure that the events that we plan are in the best interest of the public.
The Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in New Orleans on Monday, just after she was confirmed by the Senate. President Donald Trump plans to attend the Super Bowl on Sunday. He posted today on his Truth Social account 2 great quarterbacks in this game, also an unbelievable running back, and the absolute best tight end in football ever. Incredible coaching. If they would only get rid of that really weird-looking new kickoff deal, which actually makes football more dangerous, they would be doing everybody, especially the fans, a big favor. Anyway, it will be a great game. I'll be doing the interview before the game at 3 p.m. There hasn't been one in 4 years. Gee, I wonder why. Post by President Donald Trump. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.